Good evening. Oh, I'm kind of used to sitting here in the corner.
Good evening. Welcome to the regular meeting of Brisbane Planning Commission Thursday, January 14th, 2016, 7:30 p.m. Brisbane City Hall, 50 Park Place, Brisbane.
Commissioner Anderson?
Present.
Commissioner Doe?
Present.
Commissioner Manier?
Here.
Commissioner Parker?
Here.
For record show, Commissioner Reinhardt is absent.
Could we have a motion to adopt the agenda, please?
I make a motion to adopt the agenda of January 14th, 2016.
A second?
All in favor?
Aye.
Before I say yes, there was a little changes to the minutes. Yeah, you can.
Yes, and that is item
discuss at that
H.
time, yeah. Okay,
Oh, yeah, item H.
okay.
Thank you. Oral communications, there's a total of 15 minutes. Does anyone in the audience want to address the commission on issues not on the agenda? No? Okay, so we'll move on to written communications. We have a letter from Park Point Owners Association in relation to public hearing 23 San Bruno Avenue use permit UP-2-15 and design permit DP-1-15. We have a League of California Cities flyer on the Planning Commission's Academy on Wednesday, March 2nd through Friday, March 4th. And we also had, as Commissioner Manier mentioned earlier, we had an email communication from Ms. Anya Miller regarding November 16, 2015 minutes, which will be addressed at item H, approval of draft action minutes. Okay, does anyone else have any written communications to share?
No.
No? Okay. So, on to new business. Public hearing 23 San Bruno Avenue, use permit UP-2-15 and design permit DP-1-15. Use permit and design permit to allow for the construction of an approximately 31-foot-high, 3-story, mixed-use building, including 4 1,250 square feet to 1,323 square feet residential units on the second and third floors, and an approximately 550 square feet ground floor commercial space and ground floor parking to replace the existing single-story commercial building on a 5,000 square foot lot. Joseph J. RAILLA Rala, applicant, and Lon Carter, owner, APN 007-223-080. Staff report, please.
Yes, thank you. I'll try to keep my introduction fairly brief tonight. I know the agenda is fairly full, and we have, I think, a number of people from the audience who'd like to speak on this matter from indications. So the proposal is to remove a 48-year-old single-story tilt-up commercial building and replace that with construction of a 3-story mixed-use building that would include a 550-square-foot ground floor storefront. This would be for the applicant's own business. He's a plumber, so this would be his office storefront. It would have 6 parking spaces and a garage behind that storefront. And then above that, on the second and third stories, it would have 4 two-bedroom apartments side by side, with the bedrooms on the top and the main living space on the second story. And of course, a design permit and use permit is required for new structures within the NCR02 district, and use permit for residential uses, mixed uses. So this is the first block of San Bruno Avenue, so it's an infill project. This is a photo of existing conditions, so the single-story building in the middle is the subject site. And then you have on the left-hand side is 1 San Bruno Avenue, also a 3-story building, and the right side is 35 San Bruno Avenue. This is the applicant's artist rendition of what the front would look like after completion. Thank you. So you have at the left-hand side is a 2-way driveway in and out, and the storefront to the right-hand side, a pedestrian gate on the far right, and also another pedestrian gate next to the garage. The building goes lot line to lot line on the sides, and then at the front And we'll see a site plan as well. I'll go quickly through those. But on the front, it's stepped back 2 feet from the front lot line, although 0-foot setback is the requirement, but there's also a requirement for landscaping to enliven the front facade and relate to the streetscape. I'll just add at this point, seems we're looking at this rendering on the left side is also a garage with one San Bruno, and then they have a balcony that would be paired up with the 23 San Bruno balcony on that side. That left-hand side in this image would be the back yards, if you will, or back balconies for each residential unit. The front would be the right side, so it would be next to the 35 San Bruno Ave. So you have essentially private balconies both on the back for each unit, and then entries with a private yard space on what's the front entry of each unit. So this is a ground floor plan, site plan. So you can see the entry in and out through on the left side, the retail space. There's an elevator, ADA parking requirement per building code, and this total of 6 parking spaces on site. The parking on the street is essentially reconfigured, but maintaining the same number of parking spaces as currently exists on the street. At the rear, you have a 10-foot setback, and the applicant proposes to have that paved, and I'll touch on that staff's recommendation a little bit later. So there's 2 staircases here to get to the second level, as well as the elevator. So a staircase towards the front, another one towards the rear, and then the elevator there. This is the second floor, so it's turned sideways here from the last image. You have on the bottom of the image, you have the rear yard, so that would be on the one San Bruno side, and then the entrances on the top of the page there. Main living space, again, kitchen, living room on this floor. I'll back up here actually quickly. There's also a planter box that would planter box awning that would extend out, and this would go just over the front lot line, and the city engineer has reviewed this and indicated that he has no issues with that. This is the 3rd story plan, so 2 bedrooms for each unit. And more renderings here essentially of or elevations of what the top is the entry side, and what's in cinder block would be essentially at the same level as the parking garage on 35 San Bruno. Bottom left is the rear, bottom right is the front again. And then this is one San Bruno side, and the wall here would extend 6 foot 8 inches above the balcony or patio, if you will, levels. And so the intent was to provide privacy between this development and the development next to it, which would be paired right. Both of them are right up to the lot lines. So the design of the building, I'm calling it an industrial modern design. Kind of the industrial side of it is it's got a raised seam metal roof, curved archways, very strong linear elements with the bay windows that you saw in the image. And, the details of the design all support that, with subway tiles on the ground floor, stucco above. Again, the metal roof, arched glass entry canopies over each entry on the residential level, wrought iron gates on the sides, and actually a wood fence, if you will, for the rail on the front is what's proposed. The height is just under the maximum of 35 feet. It's 31 feet. And setbacks are conforming. They're 2 foot again in the front for some landscaping. 0 on the sides for the parking garage, 10 feet on the sides for the second and third floor balconies and entries, and 10 feet again in the rear. Use permit findings, I'm not going to read all this, it's in your staff report, but essentially they go to adjacency and the uses and the consistency of that, whether the use would be injurious or detrimental to the neighborhood, people working or living in the neighborhood, or to the property itself, or to the city welfare in general. The application meets all of the findings. It's consistent with the general plan. It's although it's a relatively small development, it is transit oriented. It's within a quarter mile of the local transit stops, in a mixed use. It continues to keep that ground floor storefront. The density is a little bit lower than One San Bruno at 35 units an acre versus 43, and significantly less than 35 San Bruno, which has 87 units an acre as a density. So the form and scale is also consistent with those side setbacks on the upper levels. It allows for light and air between the residences. And that second floor wall between One San Bruno and this proposal allows for privacy as well between those balcony areas. There's 20 different design permit findings, and those are listed in your staff report. They fall into 5 key categories: the neighborhood compatibility, which overlaps a bit with the use permit finding, streetscape vernacular, and pedestrian scale, the building design itself, landscaping, that activation of the streetscape, and the size of the commercial space. So the development regulations call for 600 square feet of commercial space, but also has a finding built into that allows the Planning Commission to approve less than 600 with certain findings associated with that, and we'll get into more detail on that. So again, neighborhood compatibility, it's sensitive, staff feels it's sensitive to the existing uses with that 10-foot second floor side setbacks for light and air. Complementary architectural styles to the neighboring properties with that industrial modern design. You have a mid-century next to it on one side and more contemporary on the other side. With regards to the streetscape vernacular and the scale, pedestrian scale, it respects that. It's got good articulation in the front with the bay windows and the planter box awning. The varying of surface materials, the subway tile at the lower level paired with stucco above helps to break up the mass of the building, as well as good-sized storefront windows to relate the pedestrian environment to this building. In terms of overall design form and details, again, it's consistent with the adjacent property. And internally consistent in that its details just strengthen the overall design. And I touched on this a bit already. Landscaping is low to very water low use plants. The front provides that activation at the street level, both at the ground level as well as above with the planter box. The owner has indicated that they put some seedless olive trees as a kind of a starter, if you will, for activating the upper level, the second level, and then further landscaping of that could be up to the individual tenants there. In the rear setback, staff recommends plantings and seeding in that area versus just pavers, which the applicant has proposed. And I'm going to step back. Actually, there was a recommendation here on the bottom of this that's on the design details to enhance the design, that that staff feels that possibly a switch in the color recommendation might be made to essentially do a darker stucco paired with the gray tile. There's some samples up here on the stucco and tile at the desk. And then to continue the subway tiles across the exposed concrete bands of the garage and pedestrian entries. And also that the guardrail fence at the front not be just wood, but that be stucco to match the rest of the front of the building. And we can go back to that in a minute. So the final finding that I'll highlight here, and again there are many more in the staff report, has to do with the size of that commercial space, and that the finding is essentially that it's as large as possible for its intended use given the configuration of the site and constraints there. So you have a 5,000 square foot lot that's internal, not a corner lot. By the code, it has to have a certain number of parking spaces, which it meets. It needs driveway access for those spaces, trash recycling, which is included in the ground floor, walkway access, and elevator, which has ADA requirements tied to that, the 10-foot rear setback and front landscaping all combined to really limit that, and staff looked at this with the applicant to try to essentially maximize that square footage, and so we feel that meets that finding as well. So in closing, staff recommends conditional approval of the design permit and use permit via the resolution. And if you want, we can flip back to any slides if you have any questions.
So at this time, does the commission have any questions for the staff?
Yeah, I got a couple of questions here. Regarding the sprinkler system, has the fire departments looked at that?
They have, and they have, there's a condition of approval that's embedded in this, that it will be sprinklered.
Okay, the other question I have is regarding the outside design itself, and you recommended that stucco color be changed. Did the applicant submitted the three-dimensional model? Because the reason I'm asking that is by looking at just the two-dimensional view, and we made a big mistake with one San Bruno. I was part of that team that approved that, and now I look at their design. Every time I drive by there, I regret. So I wanted to make sure that this design also we look at very carefully how it's going to look from the street from three-dimensional view, if possible. And maybe we can ask the applicant to bring a three-dimensional model to look at it, especially the curved roof over there that gives a little bit more industrial look. So I wanted to see that if you require that or not.
That may be a good question for the applicant and his architect in terms of modeling and how it's best portrayed. I know there are the elevations, and there's some color elevations up on the wall here that didn't portray as color in the staff's presentation here. But
yeah, the color has to be very careful too, because we don't want the dull yellow everywhere over there. And I think that might be a subject of discussion with the applicant. So I will discuss that.
I have a question. I understand that in the NCR 2 zoning district, there's no prescribed minimum or maximum density. But I was wondering if there's anything in this application other than the size of the commercial building that would be considered a variant, atypical of what's already in this district.
so the zoning calls for the 600 square feet, it has, and this was in your staff report, it says 28 square feet for the height, but the Planning Commission may approve 35 through a design permit. So it's over 28, but it's well within 35, so staff does not see that as an issue. It wouldn't rise to a variance. It's something that's before you as a design permit, so that's permissible. The landscaping is called for 10%. Now they have the rear setback, which is proposed to be paved, which staff is suggesting that the condition include that to be more of a true landscape versus, that people can enjoy versus paved back there. And so that would, on its own, would make up that 10%. The landscaping up front would be in addition to that, so staff does not see that as an issue. So with the conditions of approval, staff sees no issues.
All right, thank you.
It meets all of the design standards, yes.
And regarding the parking requirements, there's 6 spaces for 4 units. I was wondering how those are allocated at the discretion of the builder, or?
That would be correct. There's not a specific prescribed method for the code calls for 2-bedroom units to be 1.5 spaces. It doesn't designate how that's broken up. So I would imagine it might be, and this is just supposing here, that it might be the case where you have 4 assigned spaces and 2 spaces that are essentially more at will.
Any other questions for the staff at the moment?
Yeah, I just want to mention that we just received this comments from the Park Point Owners Association, and this is the last minute. I didn't look at my email, so I didn't have the possibility of chance to review that. So I think is there any possibility where you can contact all the neighbors and make sure that they're submitted in time so that the Planning Commission has time to review this? Because I just received this and there are some significant points addressed in this one here. So.
Right, I'm seeing a number of people in the audience, and I suppose some of them probably will want to speak to that, I'm guessing.
Yeah.
But yeah, we do the public notice at least 10 days ahead of the meeting, and so hopefully we get timely comments. But yeah, when you have a document that has a lot of comments, I can understand your.
Yeah, I think this is a message to the association also. Next time, whenever this is a situation like this, I'd like to see that we get this ahead of time so that we can review it. And one last question is regarding the parking. Was there any special provision was made for the, like trucks and all that in your? I didn't see it in the report, but is it, a lot of these plumbing store, they probably have a lot of trucks coming in, loading and unloading and all that. A lot of them, they do it on the street. So is that the case here too, that staff and
Staff has seen the truck that the owner uses for his business, and it doesn't raise a concern on my part, but I think the applicant might want to speak to
I'm not
his,
talking about
his intent.
Owners, but there are a lot of contractors, they're going to come there to pick up this stuff and all that if it's a storefront. And majority of them have the trucks and pickups.
Right, and the condition as it is, you existing conditions of the site and the street front, you have parking at the street, and that I would imagine could accommodate those kind of quick stop by visits, and so the parking would not be reduced; it would be reconfigured, but not reduced for the site.
And also the concerns with the diesel trucks. We're going to put the restrictions here, right? Regarding the diesel trucks, they're not to be continuously running. if the people are parked there and go into the store and keep the diesel trucks running. Just like we do that in the Crocker Park.
There are AQMD, BEA AQMD standards that apply to any kind of vehicles like that, trucks, and those standards would apply to this project as well. The city doesn't have its own separate idling standards beyond BEA AQMD.
Okay, as long as we do that, that's okay. No more questions.
I also am a little concerned about the parking in front. I mean, it seems to me that people are going to be coming and picking up merchandise, and if there's someone just parked there, that might be an issue. Because it basically is one, as I see it, one parking place when I drove by. Is it more than one?
It's one complete space in the
Right.
frontage.
Right.
And then there's a space that would be between the two driveways. And then
That's true.
a space that's partially overlapping this site and mostly in front of 35 San Bruno Ave. But the code does not require, just for, as the case is as well on Visitation Ave, it does not require commercial off-street parking. The idea is to encourage mixed-use development, to require it for the residential uses only, but that the parking for commercial uses would be dealt with on-street. And also, you know, the intended use at this time is for a plumbing business. This storefront use could be easily converted to more of a retail or a small restaurant. So those, whether they're, I guess I'm going to the trucks and that type. It can really vary by the business, and that could change over time, just as it does along Visitation Avenue.
I guess my other questions were for the applicant.
I have another question before we move on to that. On the map, it noted in the commercial space potential for a future restaurant. I was wondering if that's a viable use given the size and zoning.
So there's a chase built in to the space that runs from that commercial space up through the next two floors above to allow for possible future venting if you had a stove or something down there. I think whether it's big enough, I think it really depends on the business. You have examples of some very small restaurant business on Visitation that seem to make a go of it. So I would think so.
And one final question. It seems the neighbors have requested compensation for this project, and I'm wondering if that's even remotely within the purview of the Planning Commission.
That is not something the city can legally require on development like this.
Thank you.
Any other questions from the commission? No?
No.
Okay. So before we open it to the public hearing, I would like to request that everyone who wants to speak, and it looks like there's a lot of you out there, could you please get one of these half sheets from up front, the table up front, and fill it out with your information so that we can, I take pretty copious notes while people are talking so we can actually address your issues thoroughly. So if you haven't done so, please have one of these. If you have it already filled out, please turn it into the staff so that we can have it submitted up here. No one else wants to speak? Including, well, the applicant we're going to speak to anyway. Yes, please. Could you fill one out? I appreciate it. Thank you. Okay. Okay. So we are going to open the public hearing. Could I have a motion to open public hearing
I'll make a motion to open the public hearing.
for 23 San Bruno Avenue, use permit UP-2-15 and design permit DP-1-15. Okay. Second?
A second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye, okay. So public hearing is open. We have Ms. Barbara Ebo.
Through the chair, I would suggest you hear from the applicant first.
Oh, yes, sorry. Yes, applicant, please.
Hello. Hello, my name is Lon Carter. I'm the owner of 23 San Bruno Avenue. Thank you all for coming tonight to discuss our proposed development at 23 San Bruno Avenue. First, a little about myself. I've been a lifelong Brisbane resident. I went to BES and Littman School, and I'm proud to call Brisbane my home. And I can't imagine living anywhere else. During my lifetime, I have witnessed a lot of changes in town, such as the demolition of the Cozy Cove Motel and its transformation into the beautiful community park we have today. As a kid, I remember this property. It was known as Dee's Cleaners. We would come here to get our dry cleaning, pick up developed photographs, and use the copy machine. I was fortunate enough to purchase the property in 2010. I own a small plumbing company and have been providing plumbing services in Brisbane for almost 20 years. I am not an outside developer, but I am a lifelong resident who has worked really hard to get to this point. This is a great project for the neighborhood, and as we are removing an old one-story industrial building that has sat nearly vacant for 20 years and building a new mixed-use building in accordance with the city's goal for providing more housing in the downtown area. This project will definitely improve the look and feel of San Bruno Avenue and increase the value of the units surrounding it. In addition, our building can also provide housing for a disabled person with the addition of the elevator and ADA designed bathroom. In response to questions about people coming and picking up merchandise from the commercial unit, it's more of an office space for my company, desk, computer, storage of that sort of nature. So we're not expecting people comings and goings and trucks with deliveries and such as that.
Yeah, I was not sure whether you're going to be selling the plumbing
Right.
supplies
Yeah.
and all that.
No, it's a pretty small space, but it'll be good size for a desk and some shelves and
Thanks for clarifying.
yeah. Is there any other questions from the board here? Or?
Actually, I do have a question. It looks like the balconies are very close to 1 San Bruno Avenue, rather than putting the balconies right in the front overlooking the street, which might have been cute. You tended to have them snug against the other unit. How was that configured?
Well, those are patios, not balconies. So we're kind of mirroring what they have done at 1 San Bruno Avenue, and is choosing, design considerations for the site. It's a very small space, so we obviously felt that putting the building right up against their patios would be very obtrusive, having a tall structure there. So we centered our building pretty much down the middle of the lot to provide, space between 1 San Bruno Avenue and us and 35 San Bruno Avenue. So what you kind of see is we have 10 feet of patio space. They have roughly 10 feet of patio space as well. So there's 20 feet overall between the two buildings to allow for light and air to get through. Combined with the setbacks in the front and the rear, we're kind of tucked in. I can't see any other kind of configuration of this development that would change really anything.
Okay, thank you.
What else? Did you get a chance to read the submission from the HOA of Park Point Owners Association?
I did. I saw that today as well.
Would you like to respond to any of that?
Yeah. So I carefully went through there and tried to address as much of these as I could. And so with regards to the lack of privacy, issue one that they raised, again, we chose carefully how to place this building with respect to their patios too. So of course, our patios will be up against theirs. This situation really isn't any different than would occur with neighbors having backyards against each other, and vice versa, having tall multi-story buildings overlooking somebody else's rear backyard. It's very similar to this. The views of San Bruno Mountain shouldn't be significantly obstructed at all from their patios, as our setbacks are 10 feet. So the view should still be there. I would think in their disclosure agreements too, to them prior purchasing the property, it would be disclosed that, hey, this property has a potential for being developed as yours is too. So that would be something to look for. One San Bruno also restricts the views of people behind them as well on San Francisco Street and Plumas Avenue. So there's no real precedent for saying we're obstructing views when they're already there. The dividing wall seems to probably be an issue of contention as well. We're open to suggestions from 1 San Bruno Avenue as to the look and feel of that wall. As I would agree, I don't want to stare at something for the rest of my life and not be totally happy with it. So we're open to ideas to help resolve those issues. In regards to the maintenance of it, I agree that there could be probably a water or maintenance issue, but this is really more of an engineering and construction detail on our part. I've been in the construction industry for 20 years, and I've seen what bad stucco jobs can do to a building and improper drainage. Also, I'll be the plumbing contractor on this job, so I will definitely ensure that all these issues will be taken care of properly, because I don't want my investment to go down the drain, so to speak. Any fire risk that is assumed to be there would be assessed by the fire department during planning, and so far I don't think that's an issue. We have setbacks in the rear of 10 feet, and so does 1 San Bruno Avenue, so any fires, I suppose, in there will be handled carefully, and we both will have fire suppression systems installed as well. They're concerned about apartments versus condos. Well, technically, we'll be labeling these as townhouses and not apartments. So there's just a different connotation there. They're going to be advertised as townhouses and not apartments for rent. And the reason, we will be building and constructing these units separately, as if they will be condos, perhaps down the road. But our initial decision to rent these out is to help provide us with supplemental income as we grow older. If we were to simply build them and sell them now, we would be paying a lot in taxes, and this wouldn't really make this project financially viable for us. In addition to me and my family living there, my mother may need a place to live too down the road. She's currently a renter in town, and we want to provide her with a safe, stable housing environment to keep her in a town she's lived in for 40 years. So there's that to consider. I think the idea that they raised that apartment tenants are louder and noisier than homeowners is a little bit prejudice in my mind. I don't think there's any real difference between those types of tenants versus homeowners. As far as homeowner association requirements, I will be living on the property myself, and I too don't want to see any misbehaving or storage of personal items on the patios or on the fronts. I want to run a tight ship, and I would definitely enforce my standards within the lease agreement with the tenants. In addition, we can also hire a property management company to help with this. They could be pre-screening our applicants for rentals and do background checks and credit reports. So we're definitely going to want to attract a different clientele. This project should increase the value of 1 San Bruno Avenue by removing this old building and building a nice brand new establishment here with new materials and design features. It would definitely help the look of the area that's kind of been lacking for a long time. The other issue is like the vacant unit at 1 San Bruno Avenue that's been sitting there since its construction and nothing's happened there. That would definitely be a concern for property values as well, and urge Park Point HOA to encourage some kind of tenant occupancy there as well. Parking, we have followed all the guidelines in providing off-street parking for all of the units. In addition, we have provided bicycle parking as well, so not everybody that lives there will be driving a car. And also, we are not removing any parking on the front. We're just simply reconfiguring what's there. The plumbing business trucks should not affect current parking. In fact, I'm trying to liquidate some of these vehicles. I'm just one guy. I don't need 4 trucks. So we're trying to sell some of those. Some of them will be parked at employees' house too, if we ever get to that point. But ultimately, my goal is to expand the company to where we're actually inside a warehouse in Crocker Park. So the commercial space might be used by somebody differently. And we've provided the flexibility per the city requirements for a chaseway for any potential ventilation or what have you. But it's a small space. It's hard to say. But you look at Starbucks, they're practically in a closet and they're making great sandwiches. So that's up to them. Safety and security. The idea that safety is compromised with the patios up against each other, I'm not so sure is an issue. Our patios are only accessed from within the units, the living units themselves. So the idea that because they're a renter and therefore likely to hop the fence and steal, again, I think is a little prejudicial on their part. Construction noise, we would follow the times of work and allowed and the noise limits set by the city. So again, we wouldn't be starting work at 7 in the morning and working till 7 o'clock at night or working on Sundays. The city has very strict and clear guidelines on when you can be making noise and how much noise you can make. In regards to the tree on Plumas Street, I have very fond memories as a kid swinging from that tree on a rope swing when that was an empty lot many years ago, before it was even a community garden, and then before it was a Habitat for Humanity property. So I really do like that tree. However, it is reaching the end of its lifespan, and it's developed several issues with rot in between where the main structures come together. There's clear discoloration and rot taking place. And over the last 5 years of owning the property, I've had to clear up and remove 2-inch sections of branches, 2 and 3 inches, that have fallen down onto our property and vehicles. And luckily, it hasn't hit anybody in the head in the meantime. So it's really a matter of time before significant parts of this tree will fall and cause either property damage and possible loss of life too. So that's something that should be taken care of regardless if any development's taking place. Living noise, again, they raise a concern that because there's going to be tenants in apartments, there's going to be a high turnover and a lot of noise. I don't think that's any more true of the tenants that are living at 1 San Bruno Avenue. Nobody's really making noise there either, so it's a little... As far as the easement, I don't think this is an issue. We have no reason to use the surrounding land. All our utilities are located within our lot. So if there's any clarification that needs to be done there, we are open to hear that. In the proposed resolution options, They propose that we have a walking path between, I suppose, the two patios. That wasn't too clear either. And I'm not sure how a walking path improves the safety of the folks on their patios on 1 San Bruno Avenue. That walking path, I guess, would allow visitors to the tenants, that could allow potential access to their patios. So I don't feel that's a viable option. I feel like having the patios as they're designed would provide the maximum amount of safety and security for the folks at 1 San Bruno Avenue and at 23 San Bruno Avenue. Yeah, again, I'm happy to work with the HOA in regards to how the dividing wall looks, but I do not want to give up creative control. And if Park Point wants to build their own wall on their own property, they can, and we welcome them to it. As far as the windows, I will discuss those with my architect, but we feel like the line of sight and the privacy issues work both ways. We have our windows, they have their windows as well, so they're afraid of us looking into them, well, they can look into us as well. That issue could be probably mitigated with blinds or whatever, but again, that goes back to people living next to each other in separate properties. They have windows that look into other people's houses too. And I'm kind of confused at the compensation. The HOA simply wants $200,000 for the hardships and $100,000 to each of the homeowners. This would total $1.8 million, and nothing yet has even been done, and they're already asking for money. So that kind of disturbs me and doesn't sit well with me at all. And I'm just curious if Park Point paid the folks on San Francisco Street or Plumas for any hardships they suffered while their project was being built. So I really don't see how our project differs from theirs. We tried to follow what they did with our own changes in style. So I really don't see how there should be really any major issues with this. So in closing, I am pleased to present this project to the City Planning Commission for approval, as I believe we have met all the requirements set forth and meet all the codes and requirements pertaining to this project. And thank you again.
Thank you.
Thank you. So, Ms. Barbara Ebel?
May I ask the applicant one question? Because I'm just a little confused about something.
Sure.
The big tree? Is
Ms.
that...
Ebel, can you do us a favor talking to? Because
Yeah, I am talking into the mic.
Okay.
The big tree, is that going or staying?
It will stay.
Okay.
There's two major...
Could you come up to the mic?
Yeah.
I'm sorry,
Yeah.
people just can't hear.
The big tree will stay. We're going to trim the two large structures that protrude over our property. And that will accomplish two things. It will prevent unforeseen collapse of those structures unpredictably and improve the health of the tree as well. I definitely like this tree a lot. It's very large tree with lots of leaves on it, so we definitely want to keep that in place and intact as much as possible.
It was just a little unclear. Thank you.
No problem.
So overall, I have a very positive feeling about this project, and I wish Mr. Carter good luck with it. I'm going to pick on a few very little, small things here. First of all, I want to start with the positive things. I like the density. It's going to meet the requirement for RENA medium to low density housing, or medium to high density housing. That's good. I like that the large tree is going to be saved. I do want to say that as somebody who's been involved in environmental horticulture, that large trees like that can suffer from soil compaction. So you actually need to have a tree protection plan in place during construction so that the roots are not damaged, because the tree can then go and die 2 or 3 years later because the roots have been compacted underneath the soil. So I don't want to see the tree lost accidentally down the road. I have a little bit of concern about the parking situation, but if they're meeting the requirements set out by the City of Brisbane. I don't think there's a lot we can say about that. So commercial is not required, I guess, to have any parking, so okay. A side issue is that we're going to have 4 new units in town. Great. And these 4 units, because of the nature of the lot, will not have any open space really associated with them. And so I just want to bring this around one more time to the community garden situation where we have people on a 3+ year waiting list. So I was hoping that the owner might be willing to cooperate with the community garden some way, possibly if there's topsoil excavated, take it up to the community garden, or if they've got equipment, and be willing to extend that equipment to the community garden, which I hope is going to be expanded. And just because of the lack of open space and because of the demand in the city, I'm hoping that the owner will be generous and cooperative in that regard, in improving our community garden. One thing I was a little surprised about is it's in the design thing, it says it takes advantage of natural heating and cooling, but I didn't see any overhangs or awnings on those southwest facing windows. And living on San Bruno Avenue and having the exact same large southwest facing windows, I can tell you it's a beast. So, of course, it is up to the owner and the architect, but I personally would recommend increasing the passive solar design and doing something about those large southwest-facing windows. And also, there are a lot of big north-facing windows, and I know in Title 24, Part 6, which is the energy code, I believe there's limits on the number of north-facing windows you can have, because while they're great for views of San Francisco, they tend to leak out a lot of energy. And then, so my main concern is an overarching concern with not just this project, but projects in Brisbane in general. And that is that nowhere, I read this packet, and nowhere in this packet did I see anything. We talk about complies with this and complies with that and meets this regulation and meets that regulation, but in nowhere did I see it saying that it complies with Title 24, Part 6, or Title 24, which is the Energy Code, or Title 24, Part 11, which is the Green Building Code. So I presume we are keeping things, I assume we're meeting those codes as a city. Those are mandatory codes for new construction. But it was just very, I would like to, at some point I would like to hear from staff on this, because if they are being met, why is that not part of the packet? Why are we not proclaiming that proudly as a city? This is, we have an we have a climate action plan, and these things need to be put first and forefront in our projects. One thing, Green Building Code, I believe, requires that commercial be solar ready. And since this building is mixed use, I believe it's my understanding of the code that it would that would be required to be solar ready. They wouldn't have to put in solar, but it would have to be solar ready. Voluntary measures in the code would ask the building be EV ready. And in the Green Building Code, there's stuff about surface water management. I didn't see anything about that in there. Construction waste management plan, that's a requirement. I didn't see that in there. Maybe it's addressed at a later point in the process, but as a citizen, I would like to see it, because I don't necessarily, they're not going to come back. I, as a citizen, only get to interact with this project at the Planning Commission hearings. I don't get to come back 6 months later and found out, okay, well, now they've submitted a construction waste management plan. Now they've submitted, and because I would think these things would be done up front, because I would think they would be part of the approval process, that you would not approve projects that do not have a surface water management plan and that do not have a construction waste management plan. So I'm sure staff is going to correct me on that or have something to say about that. But that was basically it. That if it's mostly about the wanting to see that this project is meeting Title 24 Part 6 and Title 24 Part 11, and I want the city to be transparent and forward about that. Thank you very much.
Applicant, please.
Thank you, Barbara, for the questions and comments. As far as root compaction on the tree, our rear setback does have a permeable surface there, so that should allow plenty of water to go into the ground again. The city did have a lot of requirements for groundwater runoff and as such, so we are providing a permeable surface. I think as far as Title 24 and energy codes, that will probably happen by default. A lot of the newer appliances and water heaters and furnaces are already energy efficient, and naturally we want to take advantage of energy efficient windows during this process. A lot of shade will be provided also with 35 San Bruno. We don't really have a need for air conditioning in here as well. All the heaters would be, furnaces would be 98% efficient. So I think just by default we'd be complying with all the energy codes, and that's part of the building code as well too, and that'll come through the either the inspection process and more detailed plan checking down the road. Construction, waste management, we're going to reuse some of this existing structure and some of the existing concrete slab. So that would also address some of the construction noise issues where we're not going to be doing any real, we're not doing excavating. And so with reusing some of the existing wall and slab, that will definitely cut down on build time and demolition time. Some things that are already in the existing building will get reused. Some of the plumbing fixtures are still in good shape, and they'll get reincorporated into the new commercial space. I too am environmentally minded as well, so we want to definitely have this project environmentally friendly as possible. Hence the curved roof. We won't be using petroleum products on our roof, and since it's metal, it'll be the only roof I ever have to buy, and that makes me very happy. I too am a gardener. I love my garden and my plants very much, so anything I can do to help out the community garden, I will. I would definitely encourage my tenants, and I will be leading by example of having some plants and vegetation on the back patios and on the front patios as well. So there is quite a bit of open space, about maybe 200 square feet for each patio in the rear, and a little, maybe 50 or 60 square feet in the front. So there's quite a bit of open free space for people to enjoy the outdoors. So I hope that addressed. Oh, as far as EV, yeah, I would like to do that as well. That's definitely in my mind. PG&E, we have power requirements, and if we're going to be drawing too much power, we might have to add a transformer or upgrade a transformer on the pole. So I hope not to do that, and I hope with all the LED fixtures and everything else, our power requirements shouldn't be very much, and I hope to fit in an EV charging station if possible. That would definitely make the building more attractive to folks. And solar ready, I believe we will be making it solar ready. There'll be space, there'll be attic crawl space to access any kind of infrastructure on the roof, and we would be providing blocking for any kind of potential solar panels down the road. Although with the big tree behind us, the solar panels may or may not be a real viable option, but we'll definitely be ready for that down the road as well. So I think I addressed all of Barbara's comments and concerns, so I will sit down. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. Mr. Elliot Cohen.
Hello. I know I have a little bit of a loud voice, so if you let me know kind of how close to the mic I should be, I will be happy to facilitate that. As was stated, my name is Elliot Cohen, and I'm the Vice President of the Park Point Homeowners Association Board of Directors. I'll be here speaking today as representing the homeowners of Park Point 1 San Bruno Avenue. I'd like to start by apologizing for our late submission of this document. We received notice, or I should say I received notice, I cannot speak for all of the owners in this regard, on Wednesday of last week. We called a homeowners association meeting to hear all of these concerns, compiled them late last night, and were able to submit them this morning. We would have submitted them last night, but it was already midnight, and I wanted to make sure that I reviewed it before we were able to submit that today. Our meeting was held on January 12th of the Park Point Owners Association, where the members were able to bring forward their concerns. I will be representing those concerns here. The following categories briefly list out the areas where the Park Point Owners Association, which consists of 16 condominium units, find concerns that are injurious and detrimental to the owners previously described. The first that I would like to bring up is the recent purchase. Many of these units were recently purchased, all of them after 2008, the completion of the building, but some of them within the past 18 months, myself included. I'm very happy to be a part of this community, which is why I targeted it to be living here, and want to be able to represent that and make sure that our community is as strong as possible. Now, the proposed building, the owner of that property had said that notice would be provided prior to any ownership or purchase of those units. We did not receive that notice, of course, ahead of time, as this was not on the books at that time, but it still carries a significant amount of importance that we had purchased these units without any indication that this would be in place. Going on to the second point, our lack of privacy, and this is one of the areas that we really want to focus in on. The addition of the patios directly meeting the patios at 1 San Bruno Avenue, even with that dividing wall, completely diminishes the privacy of those units, especially auditorily. Additionally, arguably more importantly, having that third-story residential floor with clear windows that are at eye level does three things. The first, it allows a horizontal line of sight directly into the third-story bedrooms of 1 San Bruno Avenue. The second, it allows a downward line of sight directly into the living rooms of 1 San Bruno Avenue. And the third is it allows a downward line of sight directly onto the entirety of the patios at 1 San Bruno Avenue. Now, the owner of 23 San Bruno Avenue brought up the difference between backyards. I would agree with that, but our units are already at an elevation, and it makes them incredibly hard to get onto from the ground level. Now, if there's another level that equals that, it creates a safety concern, especially for some of the owners of 1 San Bruno Avenue. The lack of sunlight. So, of course, in order to combat that lack of privacy, the dividing wall has been proposed, which would be coming up from the garage at an elevation of 6 feet and 8 inches, I believe it is. That would cause a significant amount of vision blocking due to the new building and the dividing wall. And, of course, those views of San Bruno Mountain from our patios would be diminished. Additionally, the amount of sunlight would be dramatically cut down by both the building and the wall, of course, as the sun comes overhead, being blocked by that building. We do hear some of the rebuttals about the apartments versus condos. Of course, we're not trying to be unfair in any way by targeting that apartments may be different, but there is a higher turnover throughout apartments. Additionally, not having a homeowners association to govern this leaves this all into one person's hands. And that individual may leave the unit at some point. He may sell off all of them, bringing in someone else to be the total owner of these four. And that lack of a homeowners association would remove these written requirements that enforces the upkeep of the building's common area as well as the building exterior. And those things really help to maintain the property values of both that building as well as the buildings around it. Of course, the parking issue has already been discussed in some depth, though the increased amount of residents in the area, of course, would call for additional parking spaces. They talked about the reallocation of spaces, but that does not address the reallocation of where the commercial vehicles would need to be parked. I've seen multiple vehicles being parked in that kind of surrounding area on the lot as it currently stands, and those would need to go somewhere from my understanding, though I'm not privy to the information of everything that is required of a plumbing business. Now, really honing in on the safety and security argument, this dividing wall would be bordering exactly on the property line of 1 San Bruno Avenue and 23 San Bruno Avenue at 6 feet and 8 inches. Now, most people may not be able to hop that or scale that wall, but I know certainly that some can, myself included, and this is a significant concern to some of the owners of 1 San Bruno Avenue. Being able to hop that wall and enter their units, being able to see across inside of their units to see if there's anything worth stealing, these are not concerns that we currently have. These are not concerns that are up front with the elevation of the patios as they currently stand or the apartments being all the way across. It's very, very difficult from that 40 to 50 foot span to be able to look across, see if there's anything that you'd like to take, that you'd like to scale the building for, and having this new building would create that issue for us. Of course, the construction noise is an inherent part of construction. We understand and appreciate that it would be happening regardless of what kind of building would be in that place, though it would still have a significant impact on those living there, especially as because many of the third-story windows are bedrooms across that side. And so any noise would be directly going into a bedroom. Of course, as long as we follow all the hours and codes that are prescribed, then that would hopefully remedy that situation. But as builders go outside of any of those windows, as happens in many construction projects, this would create a significant impact on the owners of 1 San Bruno Avenue. Of course, once the units have been filled, there would be new families living in these units approximately 15 to 20 feet away from the patio doors of 1 San Bruno Avenue. Now, the regular living, especially when out on the patio, would have a dramatic increase in volume. And I'm not trying to say that this is a competition. We understand that there may be volume coming from 1 San Bruno Avenue, but that volume hasn't been reaching to anyone else directly next door up until the proposal of this building. Now, with those directly right there next and windows coming straight across, you could expect a significant amount of volume to travel through those windows, especially when out on the patios. So it is for those reasons listed, those concerns that were raised, both in the document as well as verbally today, that we propose the following resolutions. Of course, one of them would be to not construct the 23 San Bruno Avenue, but should this building want to be constructed, and it is a beautiful building as it's been mocked up, I do greatly appreciate that it's not an eyesore by any means, in my opinion, we still have some significant concerns that need to be addressed. To address those, we would like to have creative control of the color and the texture of the wall that would be dividing between the patios of 1 San Bruno Avenue and 23 San Bruno Avenue. Now, those would be the wall that's directly meeting. I know there was some confusion around that before, but this is the 6 foot 8 inch wall between the two patios of 1 and 23 San Bruno Avenue. Additionally, and arguably more importantly, the separation of the wall. Now, this is again the same wall between the two patios. By separating them 5 feet, it does two things. One, it allows for any sort of fire or emergency individuals.
I'm
Sure.
sorry, can you go back and explain the 5 feet?
Absolutely. So as it currently stands, the wall in between the two patios where they meet would be directly on the property line of 6 foot 8 inches going straight up. So we would have patios meeting each other with a dividing wall for privacy. And we would propose that that dividing wall and the entire building be pushed 5 feet away from 1 San Bruno Avenue.
Mm-hmm.
Now, this would address especially the safety and security, as somebody who would be scaling that 6 foot 8 inch wall would then also need to jump a 5 foot gap in order to make it onto the patios of 1 San Bruno Avenue. We feel as though that this is a significant disconnection that would make the owners of 1 San Bruno Avenue feel comfortable with those patios meeting, or being 5 feet apart, I should say. And the last, let's see here, the last resolution that I would like to bring forward is the no windows at eye level of the bedrooms on the third floor of 23 San Bruno Avenue. Now, we understand that the owner of 23 San Bruno Avenue had stated that it'd be the same for us as them, that our windows are there and they'd be looking straight across, and we completely agree with that. However, our windows have already been put in place. The building is already constructed. And so to be in that side and then have these new windows to look at, again, both buildings' privacy would be compromised by that, and that's something that we would like to prevent. So as an alternative, we would like to propose either high-level windows above eye level that would still allow for natural light to come in, or skylights, kind of roof-based windows that would also allow for the natural light to come in. Now, these would primarily be in the bedrooms that are on the third story as proposed by the drawings there. And we would like to think that both bedrooms, the individuals living within, would not want to be looking directly across at other bedrooms, be able to wave at each other as you fell asleep. However, the other building or the other rooms that are up on that third story are restrooms. If they want to have long windows that are opaque in those restrooms, those would be acceptable as they are opaque. We wouldn't be able to see through them. The compensation point was brought up simply due to all of the hardships that would be felt by both the homeowners association and the different owners, as well as the decrease in value due to having apartments directly next door, townhouses as they've been described. We feel as though, and the homeowners had felt as though this would be a comparable amount due to the decrease in value as well as putting up with these hardships. And the homeowners association is due to the anticipated issues with having those walls directly next to each other. We want to separate those out to reduce any sort of possibility of any mold or water sitting against the stucco as well as the concrete proposed wall of the garage, 23 San Bruno Avenue. And with that, I would like to open the floor to any questions or...
Commissioners? Any questions?
I don't think I have anything to say.
Yeah. No.
And then thank you for your time. Much appreciated.
Sure. Okay. Mr. Joseph Rayla?
Yes, I'm Joseph Rayla, the architect, and thank you for letting me speak out here. First of all, I'd like to point out that the rear yard is gravel filled for a purpose. In a moment, there's a 4-foot wide by 4 foot deep by 30 foot long biofiltration trench filled with gravel. And the purpose for that is to allow rainwater, runoff rainwater, to percolate into the ground for filtration. This is a requirement by the planning department. The second thing is that of course, will help in the irrigation of the existing tree. I'd like to also point out that as far as window heights, sill heights, it is a fire department requirement that a bedroom window be a certain height for egress out in case of an emergency. And that's a fire code requirement in bedrooms, even on the second floor. As far as the demo, we purposely, and I'm also an engineer as well as an architect, so when I design, and in the preliminaries, I think in terms of structure, and that's built in automatically, and also many of the other things such as ADA requirements and Title 24. In fact, I've already done quite a bit of detail work on Title 24. All architects have to do all these things anyway. And then as far as the demo, there's very, very little demo here. And according to the code, the building code, there is no grading permit required because we are not excavating 50 cubic feet of dirt to be hauled away. The only trenching is the footings, the new footings. The adjacent wall to the condo is going to be actually left in place. It's a concrete block masonry wall, and it's suitable to hold up a patio. It's not holding up a building, it's holding up a patio, so there's no demo work for that. About 80% of all the existing concrete slabs that exist on the site will be utilized. So again, we're not disturbing in the noise factor and all that. That's an important issue. A comparable site would have, a month of grading and hauling and all that. Let's see, I think, well, obviously, planning, you know the procedure. When you go through planning, you do a preliminary. But it has to be accurate, definitely. And this proposal is very accurate and doable. But, I mean, as far as the planning department, it has nothing to do with Title 24 or all the other requirements that the state of California and the building department will later on require of the project. For example, seismic design. We don't want the building to fall down. It has to meet very stringent regulations and the latest codes. Let's see. Okay. As far as the 3D rendering, we can have Mr. Klein, who did the rendering for us, on the computer. He can do all 4 elevations of the building in 3D, and we can do that quicker than we can build a model. And I would like to approach you to see if we can do that for you. At the same time, we can come up with several different colors if you would like, to see if you would prefer a different color. I think that's it. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay.
Will you be open to any kind of articulations in the front? I want to ask the architect.
Oh, Ms. Rayla?
Can you?
Will you be open to have some more articulations in the front elevation so it doesn't look like all commercial building?
Well,
Maybe
originally, let me tell you a little story. I hate to bring this up, but it's something food for thought. Let me put it that way. I was a former teacher. I'm an AIA member. I've been in practice for, oh my God, so many years. Well, I'm sure you've heard of H.H. Richardson, the architect, and Louis Sullivan. Well, previous to those guys, architects would design from the outside in, but they came up with a startling revelation that form follows function. In other words, you design the program, the form, and then you design the outside. Well, originally, excuse me, I'm a little nervous. This is a townhouse, so I came up with a completely different design, but planning, understandably, said it has to be compatible with the neighboring buildings, which are apartments. So, okay, I complied, and that's the reason why you see the building the way it is today.
Well, as I mentioned, that I was part of the planning commission at the time when we approved San Bruno, and I still regret to the point that how we missed that. It doesn't look that appealing to a lot of people in the town, and that's why I wanted a little bit better design articulation here, not to duplicate San Bruno Avenue, but to have a kind of an individual, character to it.
Right.
And this one kind of falls into the same pattern. as
Well,
the San
we
Bruno.
were trying to, like the windows, for example, they're just standard windows, but the buildings adjacent to us have standard windows. I mean, I can't do anything different
I think
because it won't be compatible.
Well, I think that compatibility and also the visual impact.
But
two different
may I
things.
start with having our renderer do 4 3D elevations so that you can see it in it all the way around, which is it's comparable to a model.
Yeah, this one here, I have concerns, frankly.
All right.
And
Well,
that's why I
mean,
brought it up regarding the front elevation.
look, if I could embellish it a little bit, but I mean, I'm a purist too. If you've ever heard of Julius Shulman, the photographer, he has a book called Modernism Rediscovered. I have 2 projects in that, Bill. I'm very proud of that, and they're simple.
I think staff has a very pertinent point to share.
Oh, just through the chair, it's been a really good dialogue, but you might want to complete the public hearing before you enter your deliberations phase of this particular exercise.
The reason I ask is because the architect is right here, so I can ask him the questions where I have the opportunity at this point and see if we can discuss this part, but I agree that it will be part of the, when we deliberate on this whole issue.
Well, I can work it out with Ken, yes.
So I like the idea of 3-dimensional rendering that you're
We'd
proposing.
greatly appreciate.
And I will appreciate if you can, play with the front elevation a little bit and also the roof design to make it more attractive rather than just right next to the San Bruno Avenue,
Okay.
because that, doesn't fit the character of the town, my opinion.
All right. Thank you. Thank you.
Ms. Krista Katusha?
Good evening. My name is Krista Katusha. First of all, thank you. I do appreciate what you're trying to do. I live at 1 San Bruno. I actually started working in Brisbane in 2007 at ATP. I fell in love with the town. I was lucky enough to be able to purchase my unit. I'm one of the original homeowners at 1 San Bruno. So I recognize your building is not the prettiest currently. I appreciate what you're trying to do. And so I don't want to begin this as an antagonistic relationship. I guess I need you just to understand a couple points at the time when I purchased as a single female, that of the 15 residential units, 7 of us, single females, that purchased into that building because of the safety issue. Because, look, we added that extra, the garage gate, because it was an access point that people were breaking into our vehicles, getting into the building. We've made this very safe and secure, and so I know at any point I can walk around anywhere inside my building. I can have the slider open, not worry about somebody coming in overnight. Having those walls.
Could you continue?
Sorry.
Yeah, because
Having those
people are
walls-
watching at home as well.
What's that?
Because people are watching at home and they can't hear when you turn away.
I apologize.
No worries.
Having those walls back to back, there's an intrusion factor. I don't care if it's from a homeowner. Look, it doesn't matter if it's somebody who is renting or owning. It's a possibility of somebody climbing that wall. On that side of our building, 3 of the 5 homeowners are single females that own their units. So I don't know if there are any potential modifications. As you can see, I'm actually one of the lucky ones that my unit faces San Bruno Avenue. I don't know if there's any modification that you could put those decks potentially on the front and the back side, and to eliminate the possibility or the potential of anyone hopping the wall or gaining access from wall to wall. Let's see. Sorry, I was jotting notes as we were talking. I also want to bring up the fact that he brought up fences like a regular homeowner. Fences are, when a fence goes down, both homeowners are responsible. And yes. Every home, I've owned homes before my condominium, and every place I've been, when a fence went down, both sides of that fence, generally owned, took 50-50 in replacing that fence because it affects both sides of home ownership. Let's see. I guess those are really my main points. It's safety. It's really safety for us. I'm representing the females. This is exactly why I bought in. I don't want to feel like I have to lock my slider on a 75-degree night because I'm concerned that somebody can gain access. I don't have to worry about it as I live there today. Thank you.
Thank you. Would anyone else like to address the commission on this issue? Ms. Siebel?
I just wanted to reemphasize a few things. I would like the commission to consider changing how things are done. I would like the commission to be able to see that the former, and maybe not for this project, but be able to see that the building is going to comply with the energy code and be able to see that it's going to comply with the green building code. I feel those things are very important, even if it's not going to influence your decision today. I think for the long term, the projects need to demonstrate up front that they are on a path to comply with those codes. I just wanted to throw out there the possibility of making the partition between the two buildings a glass wall with some creative sandblasting and etching. Perhaps that would minimize the sense of oppression and intrusion while providing privacy. I wanted to once again talk about the tree. It is wonderful that the tree is going to have 10 feet of space, but whatever the height of the tree is, you can figure on that being the circumference of the root. That tree is 50 feet tall. So it's the root. So you're going to need to protect more than just 10 feet around the tree during the construction process, because the foundation is going to be on part of the root system. I also had one other concern, and that is that the green building requires that there's a vapor barrier underneath slab on grade. And so I don't think that's an issue in the parking lot, but if they're reusing any of the slab underneath the commercial store, that might be a problem. Probably somebody's caught that, but I just like to say it and maybe save somebody a headache down the road in case it was missed. And I want to once again hint that if the awnings were added to the front windows, it might improve the passive solar character of the building as well as providing front articulation. Thank you.
Anyone else?
Again, for the dividing wall between the two properties, that can be an issue of discussion between us and 1 San Bruno Avenue. I would maybe like to see a lattice framework with some kind of vining plant on there as well that can provide some fragrance. It also, instead of a flat wall, acoustically having some plant or vegetation there would absorb some of the sound and maybe not make it as easy to scale the wall if there's vegetation on there. Blackberries are nice too and provide wonderful fruit for jams and whatnot. So I am open to ideas and suggestions from the 1 San Bruno side of how they would like the wall to look as well. As far as security, that probably goes both ways too. I'm sure I don't think our tenants would feel like somebody's going to, from the neighboring building, going to jump over their wall and break into their house, because that would definitely be the first place I would look to for suspects is in the neighboring units. So I think that's all I have to say, unless anybody else has more questions and comments for me. Thank you.
That's it.
Thank you. Anyone else? Okay. All right, we need a motion to close public hearing, please.
Okay, I make a motion to close the public hearing.
I second that.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye, okay. Deliberations. Who would like to start?
I always start first, but so you want me to go ahead?
Well, unless someone else wants to.
Okay. Couple of things I want to mention. One of them is the green building ordinance. To comply with that, I think it should be a part of the condition here, because that's and also the type, and also the what type of is it a silver standard or gold or whatever standard we're going to require them.
Through the chair, the building code will apply. The city's green building ordinance does not apply to a project of this scale. It'll be subject to the Cal Green, the state green building ordinance, not the city's local ordinance. Again, the idea of adding a condition that it has to comply with the building code or state code is, you can do it, but it's redundant. But and if it were subject to the city's green building ordinance, those conditions would apply automatically, because it is a part of Title 15, not Title 17, which is your zoning requirements.
So what do you think this particular project what standard that will be, in your opinion? Will it be a silver standard or what?
No, it'll be built to Cal Green, the state building code. Under the city's ordinance, there's no requirement for them to meet a LEED
standard.
tier standard, correct.
Okay. That's good clarification for me. Was there any consideration given to the low-income housing element for this?
It's not subject to the inclusionary housing ordinance. That would be for 6 units or more.
Okay, thanks. Regarding the security and safety, we heard some proposals from the audience as well as the owner. Staff has any opinion as to how that can be resolved, because the concerns are real. And I can see that two of the balconies looking at each other, that's really a concern. So are there any ways we can mitigate that? Any ideas that staff has?
Well, staff felt that the 6'8" fence, if you will, would be similar to other fences on other types of residential developments, and as the applicants indicated an openness to trellis kind of work on that might be something that would help, or if going another little bit higher might help to provide further deterrent. That might be another way. But you get too high with that, and it becomes an issue of being oppressive, if you will. And so I think there's that balance between the two.
Why don't we put a condition here that both San Bruno 1 and this development get together and come up with a solution for that, the proposal that was made by the homeowner?
It may be difficult if we condition this for something that would be outside of the applicant's own control. You're essentially putting the control into the hands
both parties
of one
have the control. I'm not saying that each party can dictate the other. They both get together along with the staff and come up with a suitable proposal to address this.
Certainly we can add a condition. It would be, I wouldn't say it's advisory, it's something that, I think what Ken's getting at is you don't want to put sort of a veto power over the adjacent property owner, something that's collaboratively worked with and very collaborative. And
yes.
Again, if there's no solution that's amicable, I guess we could bring it back to the commission for final resolution if that's your desire.
But I think definitely there are some good ideas, and they can work together, and I think that will be good for the owner also. That way they can resolve the security and safety issue. To me, that was the biggest one here. As far as the construction noise and all that, that's accepted in any kind of a building construction here. And living noise also, that's and the easement, that's also part of the, if they need the easement, they have to apply for the easement. In this particular case, they don't. And regarding the lack of sunlight, that's going to be a problem no matter what type of building you design over there, because it was an empty lot before. You're not going to get the same sunlight as before. So that has to be, again, acceptable to both parties. But I think what the developer has done so far, the owner has done so far, I think he done a good effort to address that. And dividing line also, he's planning to work with you in terms of coming up with ideas to not only to make it appealing, but also make it safe and secure for both parties. And apartment versus condos, I think that's a decision that lies with the owner. I don't think the Planning Commission can really dictate that, in my opinion. So. And the parking, they meet all the parking requirements here with the city. And as far as the street parking, the owner already mentioned that there's not going to be a retail plumbing store. It's basically his storefront. So I don't think there will be any increase of the trucks or traffic or anything like that, parking issues will not be of significant concern, in my opinion. So with that, I think I don't really have much problem other than the visual impact. And as I mentioned, I like to see some different treatment in the front. Don't look like a same thing as the other two buildings. And I don't think it's because the other building is like that, we should design the same way. I don't believe in that philosophy, and from my own point of view. So looking at this building, it looks pretty plain and really doesn't have any character in the front. And with the round, the round roof and all that, it really looks like a warehouse with a little bit, 4 windows in the front. So I will appreciate if you, I don't know whether other commissioners will agree with me or not, to look at this front elevation and see what you can do in terms of some kind of a treatment to make it look more appealing from the street. So those are my comments.
I also want a different articulation in the front. I think the color is too much like the color on the other side at 1 San Bruno. So I'd like to see a different color. I'd like the front to have some kind of a better statement. It just doesn't have as interesting a statement as I would like. I was wondering, with the fence between the two, I'm a little confused about the fence, but is there a way to make certain that no one would be able to put like some kind of ladders or anything that would sit against the fence? I'm a little confused about the fence, but I think that there are ways to make it a safe situation. So yeah, I'd like to see some changes. I actually like the round roof, but I think it could be improved. I think it's a good, interesting start with the round roof, and I just think it could, there's a way to just make it a little more interesting. With the windows are just flat against the wall, and so I would like also some changes.
Well, I have a dissenting opinion on the cosmetic issues. I feel that in this NCR 02 district, it's very much like San Francisco in that you don't have a lot of room to fill out the inside, and so, as the architect said, sometimes the outside follows the function of what you need on the inside. Certainly I prefer non-boxy houses to boxy houses, but given the limitation of space here, I would be inclined to leave cosmetic issues up to the applicant. I know a lot of people in town have opinions about colors of houses, like the very bright one up on the hill raised some controversy a number of years back, and I think staff made some excellent suggestions about color choice, but I would also be inclined to say that would be at the discretion of the applicant in this town. That's just my feeling. As far as the structural and logistics of the project, it seems to be within the character of the neighborhood and its design, and I kind of appreciate that existing residents prefer conditions the way they are to the way they will be, but I don't feel that anyone could purchase a unit in a 3-story building with another 3-story building 2 spaces away and not consider that the zoning for the lot in between would be anything other than 3 stories. So I feel inclined to vote in favor of granting the application.
Regarding the color scheme and also the articulation and all that, That's within the purview of the Planning Commission, has to review that as a part of the design permit.
I understand this.
And that's why I've mentioned that we
for this,
and I
for
don't
this
think,
neighborhood.
Yeah,
I don't disagree with
yeah.
on that.
I'm not asking for a complete redesign or anything like that, but I think that, and I think the architect also understood what I'm getting at, that this particular design in the front, it doesn't look appealing. It looks like a round building with a round roof with a couple of windows in the front. So if you could,
I had a question about that. I very much like that. Are the neighbors going to be, are the tenants going to be able to open those front windows? If we put some more, a second story planter box or something, I don't know, but.
That's a good possibility. First of all, the big window facing the street is fixed glass because it's a picture window.
Right.
And then the side windows are openable. Mm-hmm. But, that might be a consideration. In other words, you can clean the bay window by reaching around. Mm-hmm. And maybe we could try a second story, a planter. That might be an interesting way to break
something
up.
That would make the roof, I think the roof is such an interesting feature.
See, the planter on that first floor echoes the barrel vault roof, and it all ties together. And the pedestrian, as they walk through, can see the vegetation, and it would enhance the street scene.
So one thing I thought of was, and I don't know, I'm not an architect, but making the underneath a little rounded to echo the roof underneath the windows. And I don't know if that would be an interesting.
Yeah, the intent is like Louis Sullivan said.
Right.
He would say that a building should have a base, a middle, and an end. Uh-huh. And the reason why that the lower floor has this. It's going to be sheeted in this material here, which is over the concrete block.
Uh-huh.
But this does pick up, but it's a more refined finish for the front, but it does echo the rest of the masonry walls. So I would prefer to let the building sit solidly on that masonry, base. But I would like to fool around with a second or a third floor, planter box. That might be kind of interesting.
Mm-hmm. Or you can put some trellises or something of some sort, like,
I like that. I'll give it the old college try.
Yeah. You can break it up, those two, the vertical mass, two windows connected together. If you can break it in between, that would maybe another way to bring it up, rather than have one solid wall with two windows.
I think, the curvature of the roof, I think, is quite attractive. It could be, even enhanced.
That balcony does curve,
Right.
I mean, the planter box, it is curving. Like I say, it's echoing the curvature of the, but it's horizontal instead of vertical.
The second floor looks significantly better than the third floor, if you look at it, because of that.
Good.
Well, we haven't heard from our chairwoman, but she feels.
Well, I was listening intently to your debate. So for me, I find that the application, because it does meet the standards and we can put additional conditions on it, and the applicant has agreed to be open to suggestions by both the commissions and and his neighbor, I feel this is completely workable. I do have a very similar point of view to Commissioner Anderson, and I want to take it a little bit further about the creativity that everyone is referring to here, creative control. Now, when we talk about creative control, as you can see, 4 people with 4 different opinions, and we've heard from the audience, everyone has a different opinion about what creative control means. But I think we need to remember property rights as well. So just as when One San Bruno was built, I'm sure these issues were raised for all the neighbors within the vicinity. They raised these issues, it was discussed, and while we are tasked with taking into account everyone's concerns, I think we need to remember that's exactly what we have to do, everyone's concerns. So one property owner's rights, it does not outweigh the other property owner rights. So in other words, if the owner rights has met the standard or the property owner has met the standards, he ultimately has to carry that through. And once he meets that standard, the commission can do nothing but to say, approve, right? Because you wouldn't want the discretion to go beyond and actually violate property owner rights, because it can go both ways. So when you talk about creative control, then you have issues such as compatibility, you have issues such as character of the neighborhood, both of which the architect and the applicant has done their best to meet, and that's verifiable by the findings here. And all the codes that were mentioned that we should have been included, the applicable codes have been considered, and that's naturally considered as part of the natural process that the staff has to go through when they do the analysis. And in addition to that, I would like to refer, for anyone interested in additional reading, the attachment C on F.1.617, that's a part of the huge packet that's here. You might want to take a look at that because it gives you kind of a further detailed breakdown of why the analysis and the findings are as such. In addition to that, I think that there was a reference to attachment. There was attachment C. There was one more. Exhibit A, F.1.10. So you might want to refer to that to see, again, detailed analysis and reasons as to why the findings are what they are. So when we talk about articulation, I think character of the neighborhood comes into play and is a major determining factor. So here in this, where we're at in this neighborhood, this building fits in. So we can talk about further articulation, less articulation, but the point of the matter is that the articulation has met the basic standard. There is no such a strong contrast that is actually violating the character of the neighborhood. In terms of the security, as a woman, I totally relate. As a mother, I relate even more. And I understand that concern. However, I think the applicant has made himself available to have further discussions. And I think that that's something that, as a friendly neighborly gesture, I'm sure both sides can come to a friendly agreement that does not require the commission, i.e. a city organization or a city commission, to require that as part of the condition. I think that's something that's part of what we do as a town. And I think I hear everyone here saying that we all love being here. We love the fact that it's a small town. We love the fact that it's very neighborly and it's very supportive and interactive and cooperative. I think that if we apply that and use that and actually implement those ideals, this is going to be a great opportunity for both sides to grow and for the rest of us to enjoy that and to look to you all as a model of what a viable approach is to further development in our city. Because I don't see anyone here saying that we shouldn't create additional units for housing. I see that we are all just trying to work with the conditions that we have here. So my personal opinion and recommendation would be that you maximize the opportunity to work together outside the purview of what's already written and required here by code and by the city. And so I think that we can add further conditions, but I don't think there is a need for further conditions, and I would not vote to have further conditions added that would require it beyond what is already met here by the standards as set by our ordinance.
Okay.
So are we ready to put it to a vote?
Well, as I mentioned that I like to see the further articulations. If you want to vote right now the way it is, my position will be that I want to hold off.
Okay.
So I like the project, everything. I like the some of the suggestions that are made here, but I like to see the further, three-dimensional views and also some work to be done on the articulations
Okay.
to satisfy my concerns. But if the rest of the commission wants to go ahead and approve this, that's fine with me. But I will abstain myself.
I would be inclined to. Sorry, I would be inclined to be in favor of holding off to see additional articulations, even though I think ultimately my vote would be to leave any of such variations to the applicant. I certainly respect the desire to see and consider.
But let me clarify that I'm not against the project, nor I'm saying that there is any problem, but there are some concerns that must be looked at it. And I think the applicant has done a great job addressing everything, and I think I know him very well, he's going to pull it through. So I think that I don't have any concerns. But as my duty as a planning commissioner, I like to explore further venues to see how we can improve the look of this, and also how we can address the safety concerns. Some of the proposals were made by the adjacent neighbors. So that should be explored before we go ahead and do it.
Yes, I agree strongly with that. I didn't address the fence before, but I think a healthy dialogue between the two parties is
and I'm fully in favor of the design, what they're proposing here. I think it really adds some more units, and I think it will bring another business in the town also. And instead of that little shack over there, this is much better what he's proposing. So I don't have any problem with that.
I feel that would be quite interested in seeing what the architect can come. I think he's doing a very interesting job, and I just would like to see what he could do, because I think that it's a bit of a, I think he could make it even more interesting. It's an interesting building, and so I'd like to see what else. How much further up can the side fence be? I mean, I know that in the front you can add a little bit of a trellis to a fence, but I don't know about the side. I'm trying to remember the ordinance.
Well, you have a zero setback on the side, so essentially the side is, I would put it more in the design permit realm as to it's part of the building, it's part of the building design, and if you go real high, what's the appearance of that going to be, and does it function as you want it to? But don't think it in terms of a standalone fence like you would think of. It's not subject to those regulations. It's part of the building.
Oh, okay. All right. So, I am in favor of the building. I have no problem with it. I think that I'd like to see what our architect could do.
So may I suggest that we should continue this until the next meeting? When can they come back again? I don't know. 28th, yeah. Is 28th our deliberation? So that may not be a good date to...
Well, we're going to be deliberating for a really long time, so...
Why don't we continue it to the 28th, and we can, if there's a modified time or schedule, but let's continue it to the 28th.
Okay. So if it's agreeable to everyone, I make a motion to continue this till next meeting on January 28th.
So I don't have any issue with continuing it for further review. I just wanted to reiterate that I did not want to put any further conditions on the current draft as we have it, but I'm totally open, and I would love to see what the results are after both parties have a chance to talk, and also the 3D modeling would definitely give us a better point of view as to how to help move this project along. So I just want to reiterate that. I think, and everyone here is I think in agreement with that. So I take no issue with continuing it. So can we have a second?
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you.
And can we take 5 minutes break before we go to the...
Okay, let's take a 5. Yeah, it's been a long time, 2 hours.
Freak.
So,
You ready?
hi, perhaps we can resume?
Your
Julia.
speaker is, oh, it is on?
It is on.
I couldn't hear you, though.
Time to start.
Oh, you're cut off at the master.
We have a long agenda ahead of us, so perhaps we can resume. Okay, on to old business. Baylands final environmental impact report and related planning applications, Baylands concept plans, Brisbane Baylands specific plan, general plan amendment case GP-01-06, Universal Paragon Corporation applicant, owners various, APN various.
Again, the purpose of the business tonight are two things. One is to kind of discuss your deliberations process, and then sort of for the commission to decide what you want to report out to the city council in terms of your path forward. So for the first item, I'll just go ahead and turn the presentation over to Lloyd Zolman.
So back when we started these public hearings and workshops in September and then starting the hearings in October, did you actually think we'd get this far?
No.
But here we are. And you know, some of the questions you had as we proceeded through the workshops and the public hearings is how do we take all this massive complexity, all those issues that we spent 2.5 months discussing, all the various applications, 4 scenarios, water supply assessment, and all the other pieces, and move to a cohesive recommendation that is understandable for the public as well as for the city council. And the typical project, you would simply, as you just did, hear testimony and then say, okay, what do we want to do now with this project? Essentially take a completely blank canvas and try to put together a recommendation, or to start with a staff recommendation and then say, do we agree or not agree? The complexity of the Baylands and the amount of testimony heard, that traditional approach is simply not going to work. So what we have suggested is walking through the process issue by issue and starting with essentially what are the basic areas of agreement that whatever we recommend as a planning commission, whatever you recommend as a planning commission, has to be part of the final recommendation. And in listening to the discussion from the public, in listening to your questions and some of the comments you made during the hearing, we can actually start with some of those basic tenets, incorporating the sustainability framework into whatever land uses are recommended for the Baylands, protecting the lagoon, protecting habitat on Icehouse Hill. You raised, Commissioner Anderson, transit orientation. And we can take some of the issues that you raised that would apply to anything, start with those as a broad, these are the rules that would have to apply no matter what. And then we can then what we would suggest is moving from that discussion. And we've defined it here as site values and features, goals and objectives. What are the things we have to accomplish? Sustainability. And we would actually walk you through the hearing or through your deliberation with a set of far more specific issues that have been raised that need to be decided or need to be decided in terms of making a recommendation. Those would be set forward in the staff reports as we go. So the idea of just working our way through issue by issue, I found over however many years of working on general plans and big, broad kinds of projects, dealing with individual issues is a whole lot easier to get to a recommendation at the end, and also for you as a commission and the public to understand at the end what was the reasoning behind it. Unfortunately, what happens sometimes with general plans is, here's the preferred alternative that we analyzed. Do you like it? Do you not like it? There's a bunch of amendments to it. And then somebody starts out trying to, okay, what are our findings in doing this? And it's like, whoa, the pictures and the colors on the map look pretty. But in going through issue by issue, you will also find that you will have had a discussion of all the relevant issues. So whatever ultimate scenario or alternative you accept at the end, it won't be, we have to accept this one, and if there's little details we want to deal with, we can't. You will have gone through all the issues, and it will be pretty clear after your first 2 or 3 meetings what works for you. The other reason that I suggest, as I always do with a general plan or a large complex project, dealing with the issues first and your feelings on the issues and the direction you would like to take, is that makes discussion of the EIR far easier, because you have raised some issues already regarding the EIR, regarding studies that you would want to see, analyses that you want to see, and depending on where you are going and where you are leading with some of your issues, you will find that having discussed some of the issues, your recommendations of the EIR can be far more specific, far more directed to where you want to go with land use. So you will find that you have in this arena 2 different venues to deal with as you start dealing with environmental issues, planning issues. You have, or maybe several of them, you've got the general plan and policies and aspirational issues and where we want to go and what we want to see in the Baylands, kind of at that concept plan, general plan level. You have the specific plan, or depending on the scenario in which direction you go, a future specific plan to say these are the requirements we want placed there. And then you have mitigation measures and analyses in the EIR, some of which may differ, change depending on what are the land uses you recommend, because there is, in terms of dealing with mitigation measures, for example, a huge difference between 4,000, the mitigation measures you would need for 4,000 dwelling units and 6 million square feet of residential, the DSP scenario, or a large solar farm and 1 million square feet. 2 very different sets of, as in the renewable energy alternative, 2 very different sets of mitigation measures and a completely different mitigation monitoring program. So that's why we would take you through the issues, because some of them you may solve on the land use side, some you may say at the end we still need more in the EIR, but I found this kind of process works a lot better to get a better order. You're essentially building a puzzle, only you don't have the box cover that says this is what it's supposed to look like. So we're going to fit pieces together at the same time we're painting the picture. And I found the best way of doing that is with these issues. So starting with those basic things that are the overarching, this is what we want to see on the Baylands, whatever the details are. We would then move to what is the appropriate types of land uses, and we can walk you through them one by one. Easy, is retail appropriate? Are commercial office appropriate? To have a specific discussion regarding residential. We heard both sides of this. Residential is good for these reasons. There's these problems. And so the discussion you would have on those issues then can become your findings at the end, as whatever they may be. We'll talk about also how Recology fits and the potential for that expansion. There's several options as to how you might handle that over and above just there's a CPP Recology variant, and then there's others that don't have Recology. So we'll take you through various ways that Recology could be incorporated, may not be incorporated, so that you can walk through what is it you want to or not want to do. There was a lot of discussion of high-speed rail. And how do we deal with the possibility that the state may select the Baylands? And there's a lot of different ways of addressing how high-speed rail may or may not be incorporated ultimately in your decision. So we'll walk you through those one by one. And after we identify the range of land uses that you believe are appropriate, then we can talk about distribution and various options on how land uses are distributed. Do we take density basically uniformly over the site? Do we concentrate it up near the Bayshore Station? That would be more transit-oriented. Do we take development and move it back away from the 101 freeway and move it south, as you heard, from the windsurfing groups? And so we can talk about what are the various options you have on how you distribute land uses. And then finally, we'll talk about the intensity of land use and how much is appropriate, and that will get into issues of traffic, air quality, and so on. And we can walk through what is the appropriate intensity. But dealing with the appropriate intensity of land use, you'll find is a lot easier when you know what land uses you're dealing with. When you try to do them both together, it becomes very, very difficult. Following from that, then we would get to some of the other policy issues that have been talked about, some of the issues regarding the city's level of service standards. As we mentioned, remember that even under future conditions, just background traffic exceeds your existing LOS standards. What are your options as a community to deal with that? Do we leave the standard as it is? Do we modify in some way? The Beatty sub-area, one of the curiosities, remember we mentioned, is the major use within the Beatty sub-area is recology. Only when you read permitted land uses and appropriate land uses in the general plan in that sub-area, recology and solid waste management is not actually included. So we'll deal with, there's a reference to recology, and we'll talk about those kinds of things. And then the commission in a lot of different ways also talked about how do we tie the rate of development to provision of infrastructure, to provision of amenities, and so we can deal with that issue of how should development be phased. And the reason also that I would recommend dealing with that kind of issue before you get to the EIR, because there are a lot of different ways to deal with phasing of development, and we can talk about how you want to see that occur, and that may affect really what kind of analyses you would want to see or become irrelevant with addressing phase 1 or phase 2, because you may decide as a community, yes, we'll deal with individual phases, or there's other performance standard-based ways of doing things. And so that's the concept of the process, taking you through those issues. Then we can go to the EIR and help wrap up a recommendation. But I just suggest dealing with those issues first, because it will help you be more comfortable as you're dealing particularly with the EIR and trying to wrap up findings at the end when you've been through those things. So it would also be broken up into an order that would work with subsequent meetings building on what was decided at the beginning. And it's really not deciding, it's just laying a foundation. And then at the end would be taking all of the discussion you've had, where you found agreement, where you didn't, and then wrapping that up into a recommendation at the end, whatever that may be. I found this is a process that we can give you a lot more structure to without staff getting in the middle of recommending what you do at every individual step, or giving a recommendation to work from at the beginning, which then really kind of constrains your discussion. So that's what we're suggesting as a direction to go. If there's any questions, be glad to take them.
The question I have is, it's good to address each of the elements you discussed, but first and foremost, we have to decide the approach you have taken is correct or not in terms of the EIR. The alternatives that you suggested, they encompass everything, or are there any alternatives that were not discussed and should be there? Secondly, what's the difference between the conceptual versus the I forgot the word,
we have the concept plans and the specific plan.
Specific plan, yeah. Because if you want to compare the conceptual versus the specific plans, they are two different animals. And here we are combining these together. Mm-hmm. So that has to be addressed up front, because here, first of all, we have to decide whether we agree with EIR or not. And the danger of doing the way you suggested is that we don't want to be in the same situation as the survey, where the questions were asked and then we were said, oh, you agree to this. I think the basic question is whether the EIR that we had in front of us is really a correct approach, or what should come first?
If I could just briefly interject, I think I might be able to address the question. Allison Krimbine, outside legal counsel for the city. essentially the role of the Planning Commission here, as I know you're all familiar, is to make a recommendation on a project to, or land uses development on the Baylands to the City Council. And then tied to that, you also under CEQA need to review and consider the EIR. So I think the key to remember is that the EIR itself is not a project. The role of the EIR is to evaluate the environmental impacts of the project. So unless you have a project or some land use considerations to recommend, there would be no reason to consider the adequacy of the EIR in a vacuum. The EIR exists to evaluate the environmental impacts of the project. So I think what Lloyd is suggesting is that until you have some sense of a project or set of land use recommendations that you wish to recommend, it would not be efficient or particularly useful to simply evaluate the EIR in a vacuum. So I think probably the easiest and most efficient way is going to be to make your recommendations first and then to determine whether the EIR adequately evaluates those recommendations.
But the thing is that the very first step, we already have the 2 projects, but we are looking at 3. No project, the development suggested by the developer, and the community project. There are 3 are already there, right? One of them is a specific project. The other ones are not. We left out the fourth one, which was the high-speed rail thing. So I think the first in discussion should be those 3 that were proposed are adequate enough, or we missed one important one. And then secondly, we have to decide that should we go with the conceptual plan for each one of them. We have to judge each with the final details that each one can afford, look at the same baseline. Because for the specific plan, we have a lot more information. For the conceptual plan, we don't, right? So in order to do that, we have to judge both of them at the equal level plan. I don't want to be bombarded with the question that specifically on this, and now we agree to this land use plan. First of all, we have to look at the philosophy itself and say, we agree with those three alternatives that we have. Do we agree with the fact that it doesn't meet certain basic requirements that city has? Without that first step, how can we go to the third step? We cannot.
Let me make a suggestion.
I would like to say that, we as a group don't know whether we would go with one over the other. So I think that we need to figure out whether we want to do a hybrid, what we would like, and then we have to look at whether...
First of all, we have to decide whether there is something lacking before we even go to that step. In terms of the specific plan, for example, it doesn't meet a lot of general plan requirements. So in order to do that, it's like a cart before the horse. You have to do the general plan first before we even say that the specific plan is a good one.
Correct. And let me explain how I'll take you through the issues
and the
that
Planning Commission doesn't have the right to amend that. It has to be done by the community.
That's incorrect.
No.
That's absolutely incorrect.
No, Planning Commission can suggest the council that you should do the general plan amendment.
That's correct.
But the general plan amendment is not just modifying 2 or 3 or 4 things that affects this project. It's the whole general plan that city has to live with. And it's a whole new process that has to be done, that require, and I was part of the 1994 general plan, and I know that how many issues were addressed, and there are a lot of issues that haven't been discussed. So general plan is the first step that need to be done, in my opinion, before we go to the specific plan, because it all depends on amendment to the general plan.
Exactly, and let me explain how you get there, and the issue you raised using the example of high-speed rail. When we talk about, for example, the uses you would want to see on the site and how they would be on the site, one of them that we will specifically discuss when we get to those land uses is high-speed rail. You have various different options as to how you would address it. We'll take as an example, if you say as a community, we do not want to entertain high-speed rail, that's for the High-Speed Rail Authority to deal with. We'll let them deal with it. Then you have one discussion on your EIR. If you have another one, another option would be, giving you a preview of how we're going to go through some of these issues, another one would be we would, as a general plan policy, recognize, or we would recognize that the Baylands is being looked at as one of the options, and we would accept a high-speed rail maintenance yard under these circumstances, subject to the High-Speed Rail Authority proving that it meets these environmental performance standards. Then you don't need an alternative in the EIR. If you would, as another example, say what we want to do is we will, on our general plan map, put an area that is a high-speed rail yard, then you have a whole different way you would have to address the EIR.
We have to do a separate EIR for that
Right.
in terms of, but right now we are not at the specific EIR stage. We are looking at the conceptual stage, and if you look at the high-speed rail, what the information we have available so far is more than conceptual, because it has a lot more information than even the community-based alternative.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and all I'm saying is the adequacy of the EIR in terms of this one issue depends on how do we treat this issue. How do we treat high-speed rail? And Commissioner Parker, you had mentioned the possibility of a hybrid. One of the difficulties I've seen in every large planning project is you write an EIR, you analyze the project as it was originally proposed. You could go through a lot of discussion on what do we need to do with it. There's a lot of things we want to do with this EIR to make it adequate or for that project as it was originally proposed. Then you go through your deliberations, you come up with a series of changes to the original proposal, and now you find all the work you just put in on the EIR. Guess what? The EIR is not maybe adequate for the original proposal, but not the one you actually want to recommend, and now you got to start all over again. Mm-hmm. So in the end, the adequacy of the EIR, and I'm saying this with an attorney sitting right over there, but what I found is when you adopt it, is this EIR adequate for, if you're at a city council, is this EIR adequate for the project, the plan, as we intend to adopt it now? So you could end up with, and remember, I think a number of you had asked, what do we do if at the end we come up with a hybrid and now we find, how do we relate that back to our EIR? That's the reason I would walk through some of these issues. A lot of the EIR issues, the gaps that you perceive in information, the analyses that you think about, will come up, and we'll make sure that all the things you've raised, we get to them with these issues, and that's where you start saying we need this in the EIR, we need this in the EIR, we need this in the EIR, because ultimately it needs to relate to what it is we want to recommend. Now, general plan to specific plan issue, and then is when we start laying out the basic policy parameters and some of the basic issues, and we deal with some of the other issues. We'll take one example that's an easy one in terms of general plan to specific plan. Right now, your general plan says residential within the Baylands is prohibited. Mm-hmm. You have in front of you a proposed general plan amendment, which the applicant has submitted to remove that policy. You have concept plan scenarios that include residential. So one of the things that we would do as part of this process is take you through that land use. What do you want to do with that general plan policy? If you would say in your early discussion that we want to maintain the prohibition, there's not a whole lot of sense dealing in the details of a specific plan that has residential if your general plan continues to prohibit residential. So that's why we take you through those issues, because then do we even, to what extent do we even need to deal with the specific plan? If you would, from your issue discussion, lay out, yes, we want to do these things so that that specific plan is close to or roughly consistent with the direction you want to go, yeah, then you're going to need to go to that level of detail.
and that's the main concern I had from the very beginning when we started this process, that we should have looked at both of these approaches, all the three alternatives we should have looked at as a conceptual level. And then we figured it out that for the changes to the general plan, that should be addressed separately. It should go before the city council, before the citizens, because that no housing was a ballot measure that was taken. The majority of the citizens disagree with that, and I think there's a protocol. I will recommend to the council that they should do that again as a ballot measure, go before the.
Yeah.
So, but that should have been done first before we spend all the time on specific plan, and same thing with a lot of these other amendments that we have, because those are really partial amendments. If you want to do the general plan, you have to do the whole general plan as one unit, and then once that's done, then you do the specific plan. But you gave us the specific plan first, and in the absence of general plan amendment, we have to say no, right?
Well, but let's realize one thing.
That's my predicament here.
Yeah, it is a little bit of predicament, because what started this whole process was an application that came from an applicant.
Yeah.
And so you had an application submitted for general plan amendment and a specific plan. So one of the things you are obligated to do are consider those applications. And when City Council determined there should be other scenarios to be analyzed at equal level of detail, which led to the CPP scenarios, the council determined at that time they would keep those at a concept plan level, essentially general plan level, because what sense would it make to create a whole new specific plan? But you still had the application you had to deal with. So what we're trying to do with walking you through the issues is recognizing the anomaly of 4 concept plans, but a specific plan only for 2 of them, is what is the best way of dealing with the metaphor, the cards we've been dealt, and how do we get through that? Because we can't go back and change what we have in front of us.
If I could, I'd also point out the requirement for the applicant to submit a specific plan is a general plan policy requirement. So in a sense, the applicant is also dealing with the requirements that the city general plan imposed. And so we're all kind of dealing with the consequence of that current general plan policy.
Yeah, the specific plan doesn't meet the general plan policies.
There's no obligation, the applicant, the legal counsel can speak to the applicant's ability to file a general plan amendment as part of any process. So,
well, as far as I'm concerned, that in order to do the general plan revision, you have to have a separate process where you do look at the whole general plan, and it's a tedious process. I know I spent 3 years on that.
Yeah,
and we cannot just specifically say that just because of this project we changed so and so and so to accommodate this project. We have to look at the general plan as a whole, because that's a blue book for us. That's what the whole city will be looking at. And we cannot just say that these are 6 things that this project demands. Let's go ahead and change that.
I would suggest then that that's a policy option for you. If you as a body choose to make no recommendation other than for the city to initiate a citywide comprehensive general plan amendment, if that's the will of this commission, that's certainly an option for you to recommend to the council.
Just bringing it up so that we understand where we're going with this whole thing, because from the very beginning I had the concerns, and I keep mentioning that over and over again, that this is a little bit too early for the specific plan. But as John mentioned, that it was submitted by the applicant, so we have to review that. But the standard procedures that I'm familiar with is we look at the concept plan for each of these alternatives. Once the concept plan is approved, that we like this one, then we go to the specific plan. During the concept plan, we come up with a suggestion that these general plans have to be, revised and all that, and we will wait until the revision is done. Then we will deliberate on the general plan and on the concept plan and say this is fine. And then we go to the specific plan, which is a lot more detail, and it may require very, very detailed, deliberation on that. So we are doing this before we really finish the previous steps.
No, and we can actually accommodate that in the process that I've set forth. Is what we would do then is walk through the various issues that would take you through the discussion of how to select among the different concept plans, among the different alternatives, that depending on how you feel about different issues and what one offers compared to another, you can then use the discussion of issues to build a hybrid. And once that hybrid was built, or you laid out the issues in such a way that it becomes clear that it's one of the alternatives or one of the scenarios, that's the point you decide, now, is this specific plan anywhere close to being consistent with that? Because if the answer is no, it's not, then your recommendation on the specific plan is as simple as it needs to be modified to be, our recommendation on the specific plan is it needs to be modified to be consistent with our land use recommendation on the concept plan before we even consider it. It goes that way. If the way you've laid out issues on the concept plan level, you then say, yes, the specific plan application is close and we can deal with some of those changes. Then we would say, okay, now we need to deal with the specific plan, and we'll walk through the details on it. But the first is dealing, and I should have probably said, the issues that we'll deal with will be general plans, concept plan level issues. Yes. That will take you through the scenarios and alternatives, and only after that do we deal in the details of the specific.
Yeah, we don't do details first. That's what that was my concern when you start saying that. I thought that was the wrong approach, because we have to look at the concept plan and the variation, how it meets with the general plan.
Are you two saying the same thing?
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh.
Now they are.
Yeah, we are.
That's what I thought.
We are.
Now we are saying the same thing.
Okay.
Yeah.
Before,
And
when he started out, it was different. His approach was going to go through the detail of specific plans, which
No,
We don't
No, we're in this right place right now, so however we got there.
we don't need to go back.
We're good.
We don't have to go
Yeah.
back.
Yeah.
But one of the things that when we get to that question of if any of the ways you would like to see the various issues on the Baylands resolved are different than what is in the general plan now, then we can also raise for commission's discussion that question: should any amendment to the general plan on the Baylands be considered except as part for just the Baylands, or is the only way you would look at changing any general plan policy on the Baylands, the entirety of the city's general plan? So that issue you raised about which comes first, how do all the pieces fit together, we can incorporate that into your discussion also.
May I?
Yeah.
Go ahead.
So I appreciate all of the points that Jamil made and agree with you. And I also really appreciate all the things you've done, Lloyd, through the public hearings. Your presentations have really helped to clarify the DEIR and make this process a lot easier for us. And I think that's great. And I also very much look forward to you breaking down the issues. I anticipate that will be great as well, and I want to do that. I've also thought a lot about how we start this process out, because a lot of the decisions that are before us are a little bit circular. And when I'm not sitting behind this desk, my professional life involves organizing information and making presentations to explain information to other people and technical subjects. So for my own purposes, I started using a keynote presentation and slides to organize the information that we had to decide upon. And this is now approximately 110 slides, and I think that it'll take me about an hour to go through it. And some of the questions are circular, but I think that this would be a good way to start off the presentation, the purpose of the presentation is to lay out the questions that have to be deliberated on. And I think that maybe if we looked at that, as a, sort of basically what it is a summary of your presentations and the other public testimony that we received, discuss the items that are identified in this incomplete presentation, and then I think we could, that might help prune and focus the presentations that you've prepared.
Yeah, and one of the things that may help, and I always hesitate to volunteer more stuff because my partner's back there as I do this, is to say what may be helpful is I've thought through a policy-oriented process. It sounds like you've thought through a more environmental-oriented process, that we would sit down before the 28th and we could kind of meld the two so we make sure that it's seamless as we go.
Yeah, I'm handicapped by being unfamiliar with the process and unfamiliar with the Brown Act, so I just sort of like sat by myself and put this all together and figured, I'd unveil it and would figure out where to go from there. But in collaboration, I think, is good, because I don't want my biggest reservation about my own presentation is I don't want to make it look like I'm making all the decisions. What I'm trying to do is lay out the information about what the decisions need to be made. And, to the extent that we can collaborate and satisfy the requirements for public meetings, for things where decisions need to happen, then I'm all in favor of that.
And I guess we'll defer to John on.
Well, there are all sorts of ways of doing this. One is the commission could appoint a subcommittee, the chair and Commissioner Anderson, for example, and then we have sort of a facilitated formal structure to go through this materials, and or that would be one way, or it could be sort of more informal exchange of information between city staff, the consultant, and Commissioner Anderson. So it's really kind of up to the commission how you want to sort of structure that. I think the idea of having some coordination between staffs and the consultant's thought process with whatever gets presented. I think if we don't have that, that could just add confusion to this process and not clarity. So I would recommend that sort of coordination occur. So how that can occur, I leave up to the commission. But you certainly have that ability to appoint a subcommittee. That's your...
Well, my presentation is full of questions and could verify, could benefit from some professional fine-tuning, for sure.
So however you would like to proceed.
I think I need more information from you, Greg.
I was wondering if I could show the first 6 slides, which describe the structure of the orbit presentation.
And you could do it now?
I could do it now, if I can find my presentation here.
Oh. I'm going to go back and sit over at the staff table.
The job has been taken over.
No, it's merely supplemented.
I cannot do Lloyd's job.
Yeah.
I would be lost.
It's just an added value.
But I'm compulsive by nature. This is who I am. This is how it comes out. Number 4. Oh, I have to plug mine in. Works much better that way. All right, this is the Baylands. And I've already explained that in my professional life, I make presentations. And I'm new to the Planning Commission, but because of the Brown Act, I just sort of sat in a closet and built this thing. So what's the purpose of this presentation is to organize information. I'm not trying to make all of the decisions here. I just want to lay out what's ahead of us and what questions are open. Because our purpose is to make a recommendation to the City Council and provide supporting data for the recommendation that we're making. It's my thought that as commissioners, our recommendation is not as important as the reasons behind our recommendations. The City Council will not necessarily agree with us on every point, but if they at least understand why we made it, then they have the materials that they need to make the right decision. So I think that not only do we need to decide what is the right thing, but this whole process needs to also involve communication about how we got there. Scope, Lloyd has already described this better than I can, but we're circular here. We can't decide some issues until we've decided land use, but in order to decide land use, we have to decide on some issues. So what I did was I took the general plan as a foundation. If you turn your head sideways, you can see the general plan is the foundation of this. So I took the sections of the general plan, make the sections of the presentation, and then there are some other areas like the housing element is an adjunct to the general plan, and some ecology and finances and infrastructure that I've tacked on to the end that don't fit into that. But basically, the idea is, starting with the general plan, we take information from the DER, sustainability framework, and all of the presentations and public testimony, and put that into that framework. So that's how I did this. I went through these slots, found the information that was relevant, put it in the right place. Eventually, that turns into a whole presentation. I've color-coded the whole thing so you can follow along from home. The gray bordered slides, like the ones you're looking at right now, talk about the structure of the presentation. The green ones I like to call in my own mind a fact, but it's really just a reference. Someone somewhere said this thing. We may agree or disagree with it. It may be wrong, it may be right, but someone said it. The yellow slides ultimately all want to become red or green. These are things that are open either because I don't understand them or I need more information. And the important slides are the red ones. We need more red slides. This is like the enumeration of all of the things that we need to decide and discuss on. And I think if we go through this whole thing, then with some discussion after it, it will help focus the issues, I think, will align nicely with the recommendation slides, and we can get opinions from all of the council members on what they think about the different red slides and start to rewrite those. So that's everything about the structure. And I also have one more slide. Oh, I said this already. This is not about the structure of the presentation, but I just wanted to make the point that we have a very large body of work under deliberation. The public has been extremely helpful to us in the past, and I expect them to continue to be helpful in the future, and we would like to hear corrections for any factual errors, reminders of any things that we're forgetting or leaving out, but a recommendation that any sort of debate go to the City Council, because that's where the decision is going to be made, and it doesn't make any sense to debate it twice. Maybe I should have made this slide red, because this is actually something that we have to decide about, what we're going to say to the public, and again, it might be influenced by policy. So this is all I wanted to go through today. There's more about issues below.
I think it would be helpful to go through your presentation where we were thinking of heading with some of these questions. So that way we've got a cohesive set of making sure that we have everything. So if the commission wanted to do a subcommittee or just wanted to have Commissioner Anderson meet with us, however you want to proceed, but I think it would be helpful for us to go through that set of formal questions and make sure we've incorporated those questions. And if any of the others, here's what we'll need to be careful with Brown Act, but if any of the others of you have questions that you want answered through this process, you make sure John knows, and we can make sure that we get to those. A lot of them you've expressed. I think I've incorporated a lot of them into where we're going. So however you'd like to proceed with this would be.
I think in my opinion, Commissioner Anderson can work with you. And
Well, I'd
come
like
up
to
with-
sit in on it.
So we have two already.
Did you want to sit in on it? Or?
I would like to sit in on it.
Okay.
So
We're going to have to be pulling straws or something.
Because it has to be 2, not 3, no?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep. So we can,
So head or tail, who's going to be?
I abstain, so you vote, and that means that Jamil is the
well,
tiebreaker. It's a joke.
well, I don't have a problem with Commissioner Parker going ahead and being part of this subcommittee then.
Yeah.
Because that essentially
would be
becomes
okay
a
with me.
subcommittee. And reporting back, I don't have a problem with that.
Well, what we're going to do for the subcommittee would be for you to organize it with.
Well, the both of you would be a part of the subcommittee that would communicate with the consultants and the staff.
Yeah, the concept, as I understand it, would be we'd walk through this presentation, and then with the way that I've laid out, so far for you, this general process, we'd make sure that all of the questions that you have, or that the subcommittee has, are incorporated into the way that we would be proceeding through this
Right.
process.
It's simply a filtering process without violating the Brown Act.
Yeah.
So I'm totally fine with a representative, but I think a subcommittee is better than just one commissioner speaking directly with.
Yeah,
them.
no, I prefer having
So
at least
why
two
don't-
of the commission.
We're forming a subcommittee.
So we agree with the subcommittee.
Would that be? Yep.
Yeah,
Okay. Subcommittees work. Okay. So Carolyn and Greg. Okay.
See how easy that was? There was the first decision.
It comes
made on
right back up, and
deliberation.
we're going to talk about it anyway.
Yeah, and you are right. This is, in a sense, a circular process, but I was a research and statistics major, so I remember my algebra. When you're solving an equation with multiple variables, and here we have dozens and dozens of variables, the way we were all taught to do that in algebra is you start with one variable and solve it, and then you work to the next, the next, the next. When we're dealing because we don't
What happens if they're interdependent?
well, then you've got to solve several of them before you do that. But the issue is, unlike algebra, when we're done solving all of them, you don't have just an answer.
Yeah.
What we'll end up needing to do